Hello and welcome to Miss Lady Petal's digital colouring in page. So I've just opened my new website and I have an online store. So what I'm doing with this particular store is I'm now uploading some digital products that you can download and you can print on your computer, and then you've got a ready sketched journal page for you to be able to use. I tend to work loose leaf, so that's where the concept for these pages came from, and I was very dissatisfied with a lot of colouring in pages that are around at the moment that are on substandard papers. And as you can see, I'm using watercolour on this paper. So I've printed this on 220 GSM watercolour paper through my inkjet printer. My inkjet printer has waterproof ink. So once I let it set overnight, I can then start painting it, and you can see that the ink is not running at all. So I keep my originals safe, and then I print these out myself, and they're working beautifully. I'm using Art Spectrum inks, some Dynaflow inks, and some Schminke inks to put the base colours down here. I think they look great, and they allow you that variation of colour. A lot of people kind of think, yep, colouring in pages, like I have to use markers or I have to use pencils, but you don't. You can actually use whatever you like, particularly if you're able to print out your own colouring in pages on the correct substrate for the product that you want to use, like me, where I'm using heavy water media. My finished page is strong, durable, flat, not overly wonky, like how it sort of warps and bends a little bit when you add water to it. It's a good grind for this, and then I put it in with my box of loose leaf pages for the end of the year, and I then bind them into my yearly journal. Now, I got the concept for this when I was designing posters for the Jules conference that I did in August, and I sat down and essentially did all of those posters in one night. So I was able to get them all drawn up. I then printed them out onto proper paper because I used like a cartridge paper to put my original doodle on, because it's really good for fine drawing, felt tip pens and things like that, because you can see I've got some thick lines, some thinner lines here, and these pages actually just came out of me doodling in class. So I was teaching some of my art journaling students about how to find inspiration all around us, and I had some books and some colouring in books there, and I asked them to kind of construct a page from inspiration from some of the patterns and the thoughts in those books. And as they were doing that, I saw some flowers that I liked, and then I made them my own kind of flowers, and I started just doodling down the side of a page. And I like to add in these curvy lines because it defines writing that I can put in there, and it allows you to have some free space for journaling if you wish to have free space for journaling. I have two of these separate pages in my online store. They're only $1 each, Australian. So if you're an American and you're downloading this, then it's only going to cost you at the moment, I think, about 77 cents. And you can then print these on paper that you like to use, and you can use products that you like to use. You can experiment on these pages knowing that you can print another one if you don't like the first offering, or if you mess it up in some way, or you want to use different types of things in it. There's lots of different versions that you can do of this page, or if you want to cut some of the elements out and add them in somewhere else and create a 3D effect, you can do that as well. Because it would look really cool if I then had some more flowers drawn like this that I then layered on top of other of these flowers to create with some, dimensional foam, double-sided, the puff foam sort of stuff, and it allows you to have a slightly dimensional page in your art journal, which I think would look really cool, and is, when you're doing a digital download, you absolutely have the ability to do different things like that with some of the elements on the pages. So I think that's really, really cool. And it makes me wonder whether I should be doing a digital download page that is just all flowers or elements that have simple shapes around them. See, these flowers, they're not that hard to cut out. And that's my whole idea around these. They're not too hard to colour in, and they're not too hard to cut out. So if you really want to cut some of these out and print them on, say, a lower grade paper and use different media, cut them and make multi-layer pages, you absolutely can. I should do a demonstration of that at some point in the future. It would look really, really cool. And I'll just have a look and see where I'm going with my inks at the moment. This whole first section of the videos is all about the inks. I've used different types of inks, and you can tell that I like really warm colours, but you can do whatever you like with these pages. That's the beauty of them. They're a very cheap, option that if you don't necessarily want to sit and doodle, like I'm not really a doodler, but I didn't mind doing these because they weren't so many fine intricate patterns. But generally I get frustrated and I'll do one or two of these pages and then think to myself, oh yeah, I'm sick of it for a while. Or some people just don't want to draw. They just want to have the ability to have something that's pre-done for them so that they can just experiment with colour and different techniques. And that is one of the great things about having a digital product like this. When you purchase this from my store, you pay your money and then I send you a download link. You have 60 days from the day that I send you the email and activate that the link is active. Now, just please be respectful of the fact that this is my own copyrighted work, and you need to make sure that you give a link to my website when you publish these on social media. So when you purchase these, they're for your use only, but obviously if you've got art journalists in your family, then print a few copies out, but these are not to be on-sold or distributed or the files shared. That's part of the copyright purchase for any digital download in my store. And if I find that happening, then I have to revoke the access rights. This is an honesty system. I deliberately price these items very low because I don't have to produce them and post them. And then they don't have that problem of being damaged. And you can use this as you want, as many times as you want. And you can do different things with them. So that's one of the beauties of this particular type of product. But as always, we've got to respect the artist that creates the page in the first place and the products that we have. And I'm all right for you to go and disseminate this on social media, but you need to make sure that you have the link to my website, the same way that Jane Davenport does when you're referencing any work that you do that's inspired by her book or by any of her courses. It's just one of those things that we do. So now that my inks are totally dry, I just let them dry overnight so that I knew that I would have a permanent surface to be able to work on the next morning. And that's what I like about using water-soluble inks as the first layer for this kind of a page. It allows you to look like watercolour or not, because you can make them as really strong, or you can water disperse them, which I've shown you different techniques in the last part of the video. You can just see as I'm working. Now I'm working with some markers to add some more block colour in, but I also tend to use, most of my markers are all water soluble. Very, very few of them are not. And this allows me some little bit of flexibility in the way that I approached this colouring section. I like the way that these markers also layer over the top of the inks, and you can colour blend them. So for instance, if I was to use this turquoise marker over the top of this magenta ink, it would start showing a purple colour. And I can add different tones and hues within my flowers at this point. Now the markers take a lot longer to dry over the top of an ink because it's a non-porous surface than it does when it soaks into paper. So at the moment here, I'm putting my marker straight onto paper, and of course it's going to soak in and it's going to form a sharp edge. And if I was to draw with that and then try and water disperse it, it would still form a sharp edge because it's on a porous surface. But if I was to then add that marker, like I'm doing now, over the top of inks, then I can water disperse them, and I've created somewhat, depending on how thick the ink is and how much it's absorbed into the paper, a non-porous surface. With some of the more watered down parts of the ink, like in that purple flower that you saw me working on, where I've got a really pale centre in it, that's not nearly so porous, and it will work a little bit better over that kind of a surface. But nevertheless, you're seeing me work here with some really nice water soluble markers. I use Letraset markers, I use Tombow markers, I also just use Crayola markers. That's the sort of thing that I use depending on the type of colour that I want or the effect that I want. Now that it's important to just use variety and to experiment in this, have a look at your colours, see what works and what doesn't. And for me, I just love using complementary colours together. So I've got the orange next to the purple, but I also love my analogous colours where I've got my pink, my orange, my red, my yellows all together, and they work together incredibly well. But your purple pops a lot more because it's next to an orange, and I really love the fact that I can just create that as I want. I also go in and relay down, depending on the type of ink that you use. Some of the inks can actually cover a little bit your black marker or your black printer ink, so you might want to go down and put down some of your black lines. I do that occasionally with some of my finer details, and I add more dots in and do more things with my drawings. These drawings are a basis for you to either add more things onto. There's nothing to stop you from doodling extra things there that are uniquely you, making the page your own, being excited about how to do that. Even cutting out the image down the side if you don't want the words, and then cutting and pasting that onto a new page and using those elements for your own. The original drawings are still mine, but you can make them more your own in that kind of context, and I like the creativity that we can get from that. So now you see that I'm putting a blue wash on the outer area. I love these swirls that I put in, and sometimes I do like round swirls, or this is kind of like a brackets kind of a swirl, and it allows me to have different areas of colour within my page. Sometimes it's easy to just put it all on, particularly if your ink's not moving, you just paint over the top. I had chosen that I was going to colour in all the enclosed areas of all my letters while I was doing this, and what that meant was that the marker that I'd used for that was slightly water soluble, so I had to be really careful about how I approached it. Now you could approach this a separate way. You could then fill in the top part of the A for artist and the O's and things like that. You could fill those in after you put your wash over, so it's much easier. I also put my wash straight over the little berries that you see, and I move around the paper. Now, because I'm working on a porous surface, my ink, you can see a lot of my brush marks in there. Now, I don't mind that because I kind of like that sketchy kind of conceptual look to these sorts of pages. No one wants to have an absolutely perfect page, I think, that has no shades of light and dark, and I think that's what adds interest and dimension to any pages that I do. I like to have my highlights and my lowlights available, and that makes it easier for me to be able to get these projects done. And I like using a lot of water medium when I do these projects, and it gets the page done pretty quickly. I think the longest part of this entire project was step 1, where I was laying down those inks in some of these fine areas. But think about it, if you approach the first part of those projects with water-soluble markers, you might actually have a lot more dexterity and get that done a lot faster. So it's up to you the way the products that you use. You can also, I could also deepen my yellow inks, not just with markers but with pencil, colour pencil. So I can add additional dimensionality to my pages by using lots of different media together to get the finished product. And you might want to do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You will see me also, as I'm finishing doing these pages, and then going in with my white Signo rollerball pen. It is really good for keeping the colour. Now, the inks do not bleed, so the inks that I've used don't bleed, but some of my water-soluble markers would bleed through my white Signo ink. But I go straight over and add in additional elements of spots and dots and lines, and I outline things, and I just want to add layer upon layer upon layer of little kind of doodle details that allow me to then have some kind of a finished product that is really cute and really kind of zen doodle-ish, I guess is the word that we would use there, and to be able to finish that off really well and just make it really quite finalized. So now you can see I'm just dotting my white pen around, I'm adding different features, and of course doesn't that make that have a nice depth of colour? You can see the pages coming together really nicely. And I think the only thing that I might do, you know, because I've got some of those nice orangey bits, is that pale yellow inner part of the flower at the bottom. I might take some pencil in later on and work on that a little bit more, but I'm liking how the pages come together. I like how I've got the orange and the yellow around the outer edges, and that it's got a clear border there as well. So you know what, make this your own, have lots of fun with it. I just added dots wherever I felt like adding dots to add dimensionality to whatever I was doing, and I had a ball with it. So learn something new today. I've got the links to my store in the description below.